Okay, sure. Gary Vaynerchuk, internet celebrity, generally famous person, can do an NFT restaurant project and raise millions of dollars. But what about the little restaurant down the street, the little corner restaurant that you go to a couple times a month? Those little guys can't do the same thing. They're not famous. They don't have the amount of followers on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and they're not going to raise millions of dollars. What does Web3, what do NFTs mean for them? This is the question I put to Adam Broadman, who's the CEO of a company called Brightloom. He's the former head of digital for Starbucks, and he's super excited about the world of Web3, crypto, and NFTs. And so we had him on the show, had him on the Spoon podcast to talk about what all this means for the average Joe. The company is working on some secret projects to make this all easier. I try to get it out of him. He doesn't tell me too much, but we try to talk about that a little bit. And he just talks about generally where this whole space is going and how and what the value is for something like an NFT to a small restaurant. It was a really good conversation. If you're interested in what all this means for the average guy, not the famous internet celebrity, this is the show for you. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you want to listen to more Spoon podcasts, you know where to go. Just go to thespoon.tech. You can also find us on the typical podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's get to it. Hey, well, I'm excited to be here with Adam Broadman, the CEO of Brightloom. Adam, it's been a while since we've caught up.
Yeah, Mike, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me here.
I feel like, the last time we caught up, it was on the early days of the pandemic. It kind of feels good that we might be cross your fingers. I don't want to jinx it. We're maybe getting on that other side of things. And so we're looking forward towards the future a little bit, not just talking about the pandemic. And one of the things I want to talk about with you today is Web3, because I think you have some thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm excited. It's my favorite topic these days, and I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah, so many entrepreneurs who are doing things at companies they found in the past. A lot of them, when I look on their Twitter, like they're either like .eth or like they have like their NFT like profile picture. Like everyone's like talking and jumping into the conversation. But before we get into that, to let people know where you're coming from, you were an executive at Starbucks, helped kind of drive a lot of their digital efforts before you came over to Brightloom, right?
That's right. I spent almost 10 years as chief digital officer at Starbucks. Did a brief stint in New York as the president and chief experience officer at J.Crew, and then came back to the West Coast and took on a more entrepreneurial role as the CEO of a startup called Brightloom. Cool.
Coffee, clothes, and then like customers. I think it's the 3 C's. It's customer engagement. That's kind of how you would explain Brightloom, right? Kind of a customer engagement platform.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny you mentioned the 3 C's and the different tongue in cheek, but I actually remember well back in Web 1, right, and even some of Web 2. It was about community, content, and commerce back then, right? And so I'd say that Brightloom is definitely about customer engagement. If you think about my career, particularly starting at my time at Starbucks, I've really tried my hardest to build up, I'll call it a framework and a philosophy around how brands how they should think about digital transformation. And it really is all my personal philosophy that I put into action at Starbucks was you should actually seek to have everything be to have a stronger connection and relationship to your customers. So everything you're doing, whether it be rewards or convenience and ordering and loyalty, mobile apps and you name it, mobile ordering, it all should even personalized marketing, which is what Brightloom is focused on today. Those are all a means to an end, which is how can you have a stronger connection to your customers and a stronger relationship with your customers. And so my life's work is all about like finding cool digital tools to allow brands to do that.
All right. So let's talk about NFTs, Web3. In our pre-conversation, I gather that you're excited about NFTs and what those can mean for what the relationship that a brand can have with a consumer. So what are you thinking there? Why are you excited?
Well, let me let me tell you a story about why I'm excited. So as opposed to just say, blurting out the answer. So let me tell you a little bit of my journey. So we just talked about my career journey a second ago, but my personal journey in, I'll call it blockchain technology or Web3 or crypto, whatever you want to call it, is centered around about this time last year. I made an investment personally in a venture fund that was focused on crypto. And they asked me, it's actually run by one of my best friends, or my best friend, Andy Sack. And he basically said to me, Adam, I'd like you to not just be an investor, but be an advisor, but kind of taking advantage of my experience set as a digital executive, as you put it, but bring that and sort of learn about crypto and learn about blockchain and learn about what was happening. So I went on my own journey to learn about these things. And so I read everything I could about Bitcoin and Ethereum and decentralized finance. And I remember listening to a podcast. It's ironic that we're on a podcast, but I was listening to a podcast where Laura Shin was interviewing Mark Cuban, and he was talking about the power of NFTs. And this was around the same time that Gary Vaynerchuk was talking about doing a project in NFTs, which he now has done incredibly successfully, called VFriends. But at that time, nobody was really focused on NFTs. Beeple hadn't made his big sale yet. Bored Ape didn't exist yet. Of course, there was Top Shot, which is the NBA's platform for NFT collectibles, and that was doing incredibly well. And there was some digital art that was happening, but it hadn't exploded. And when I heard this podcast about how, for example, the Dallas Mavericks could issue their tickets as NFTs in a hypothetical sense, but I think Mark Cuban was being very serious about it. It was like you could issue the ticket as an NFT, and that NFT, you could dial up or down the royalty rates depending on what you wanted to do in terms of attendance. You could airdrop bonus content into the people that held those NFT tickets while they were at the game or as they were walking out of the game. My head just went like, wow. Like I was like, all of a sudden I was like, wow, NFTs are a digital asset. They basically, people think of them as a picture or a video file or a music file. And yes, they can be those too. They can be, but they're actually a digital asset that you own. And so therefore they're both a digital collectible, maybe a branded digital collectible, but that it can double as a loyalty access pass. Oh, and by the way, because it's programmable, it is something that you can capture royalty payments to the creator or the brand, in that case, upon secondary sales. So it was like an investment asset. It was programmable. It's brandable. And it can double as a loyalty access pass. And I've never heard of something like that. I've never experienced something like that. That sort of a, multifaceted digital tool. And I thought it would be, as a digital marketer and digital strategist, I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard of.
So your head kind of exploded. You started mulling over the concept. And here we are now. You've seen things like, Vaynerchuk and his NFT restaurant concept. You've seen some CPGs starting to get in there. I still don't think I've seen a lot of great CPG NFT campaigns, but I've seen a few that are kind of interesting. So where are you now in terms of the ways in which you think you can apply an NFT concept to a consumer packaged good product, to like a food offering or whatever? How are you thinking about it today?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of good examples today that I'd point to. And the longer answer, though, is it's whatever you can think up. But let me give you some examples. So I think there's a company out of California, I think they're in Southern California, called The Hundreds, which is a streetwear brand. It's almost a 20-year-old company that was co-founded by I think Bobby Kim or Bobby Hundreds and his co-founder Ben. And they what they did is they created, they have this rich history of offering clothing and sneakers and hoodies and T-shirts and things like that on e-commerce, through e-commerce channels and wholesale channels. And what they did is they offered up a collection of 25,000 NFTs for sale that were all based off of their logo, which is this cute bomb character they call the Atom Bomb, ADAM, and they actually put different designs and stories behind every one of those Atom Bomb NFTs, and they sold them. And they basically said, this is not only going to be a digital collectible that is steeped in rarity traits and fun stuff that comes from our heritage, so it's a brand digital collectible, but it also doubles as a loyalty access pass. And also, you're going to be a member of a community called the Atom Bomb Squad. So you're going to be a member of our loyalty program. And what they did is they essentially said, only members of the Atom Bomb Squad, identified and provable by the fact that they hold one of these Atom Bomb NFTs in their wallet, are going to be able to get access to either early access to drops and exclusive merchandise and other benefits. So it's one part loyalty access pass, it's one part community, it's one part digital collectible, and it's one part digital asset that you could sell if it happened to appreciate in value. I think it's like one of the best examples I've ever seen of a both a direct to consumer and brand utilizing Web3 in an authentic kind of multidimensional way. I think another example I'll give you is Adidas. So Adidas, and Adidas, you could say, is a CPG brand of sorts. Sure. So they're multi-channel. They worked with a fantastic influencer in the space named G Money. So G Money, who I happen to know and think is the world of, is a somebody who has his own persona in Web3, but he went in and advised. He's also a very successful NFT collector. He went into Adidas. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was on a Twitter space yesterday with G Love. Like, the artist G Love. I'm like, all the G's are getting in. So I interrupted you. Go ahead.
That's okay. So G Money is this like well-known in the NFT community in particular. He's a well-known, successful, smart brand unto himself. I mean, he's a collector. He has a podcast, and he's a thought leader and an influencer as well. And so what G did is he went and connected with Adidas and basically helped them figure out their strategy. And what they did is they collaborated. They created an NFT. As opposed to doing a collection with different rarity traits, they made a single NFT, and you can do this. You can do a single NFT that has that you can say there's 30,000 of this one NFT, which is a weird concept because it's kind of a fungible, non-fungible token. But the point is, you can do 30,000 of this one design, and if you bought this NFT, you would be able. It was going to be your ticket essentially into this club that would allow you to get some exclusive merchandise from Adidas. It would allow you to literally redeem it, I think, for actual merchandise from Adidas that was limited edition. But also, they're going to do other things with it, and they're going to they're collaborating with some other blue chip projects in the space, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club and Pixel Vault. So it was like a really smart other example of a brand authentically, just like the Hundreds did, authentically creating an NFT collection or an NFT offering, but making it double as not just a digital collectible, but a loyalty access pass, a ticket to a community. Yeah. And like, these are all things that happen when you take a piece of digital media and turn it into a programmable digital asset. Like, that is, like, as a brand marketer, that's an incredible transition in your brain to be like, wow, I produce digital media all day as a marketer. What if I could actually flip it on its head, and instead of it being this sort of non-ownable, ethereal, almost discount-oriented type of thing, instead I can have it be a digital asset that's branded, that stimulates community and can be a loyalty access pass. Yeah. So I do think there's value in the idea of like community. There's a value into the idea of being a part of an insiders club. And I think this idea of like provenance and proof of ownership is really cool. And then I think real world utility in terms of like benefits that you can convey upon the owner, I think is interesting, and I think would be treasured by like a community. It seems like so much of this oftentimes emanates out of or kind of comes out of a smaller, authentic brand
but I oftentimes wonder if like when the bigger brands do this, they sometimes can stumble. I think Adidas is an exception sometimes, but you'll see clunky efforts by bigger brands, which a lot of them do seem like they're jumping on the NFT zeitgeist to, or at least trying to. Do you think it's possible for big and personal brands to do this, or do you sometimes think they need it needs to be a specific type of brand that has that authenticity?
No, I don't think it's about the brand. I think you're absolutely right, and it's a good question. But let me try and answer. So I don't think it's that one type of brand or the other is going to be more or less likely to succeed because of their brand. Mm-hmm. Where they're going to be more or less likely to succeed is whether or not they're willing to roll up their shirt sleeves and work with people that understand the space and are in the space so they can execute it in an authentic manner. So it is a lot of big brands, it's hard for them to do that because they have committees and lawyers and groupthink, and it's hard for them to do that. So it's less about the type of company or the brand. It's more about whether or not the culture and DNA of the company will allow them to work with the right people to get it done. So, for example, Adidas did that with G Money, and they collaborated. Obviously, I think Bobby Hundreds he has a saying I think is great. He says their brand was like an NFT brand 19 years in the making, meaning it was just so natural for them. And you kind of pointed out kind of a smaller brand, although they were really a famous brand. I would tell you Nike, I think, acquired a metaverse NFT company called Artifact. I've seen other examples of some big brands right now that have done it well. I've seen plenty that have not. And what I'll tell you is this. If a brand that wants to do this, what they have to understand, and it was no different with social media at the time, back when that was a big deal, with Web2 back in the, I'll call it 2005 to 2010 period when that was emerging. Like the best examples of what companies did then, and I would say this is going to have to happen now, is brands have to understand they need to hire or work with, they don't have to hire necessarily, hire or work with individuals that have taken the time to participate in this space for months and months and months in a real way, that have got the battle scars of making mistakes and have been living on NFT Twitter and living in Discords and, authentically working to build projects. I mean, You just can't fake this stuff, and you got to live in it and breathe it every day. And if a brand's willing to do that work, then, and they've got smart people around them, which they already do, they're going to be fine. It's not about the size of the brand or the type of the brand. And I'm not kidding you. Like you might say, could Clorox bleach do an NFT project? The answer is yes. Of course they could. They absolutely could. And it's not, but they'd have to be creative about how do they make their project fun and interactive and authentic to the space? And sure they could. So, I mean, brands have advantages that these projects in the space don't have, which is they've got real brand heritage, they've got budgets, they've got talented people. They have to understand they've got more assets than they realize, but they have to do it in an authentic manner.
I mean, so much of what I think we've been seeing happen in the world of CPG that's been exciting over the past 5 years has been the D2C revolution, right? Like you have the crafts and the General Mills that have convoluted distribution value chains. But the exciting stuff that I've been excited about is watching these new brands come out, like the Magic Spoon cereal or whatever, buying like this really cool keto cereal online or whatever, getting a subscription to coffee. And these are the ones that I'm actually seeing doing interesting stuff right now. These emerging D2C brands in NFTs and Web3. I'm not necessarily seeing a lot of it,
right.
Not seeing a lot of it necessarily with kind of these more established brands. So I guess the question is, or the thought is, it does seem like there's a symbiotic relationship with this direct to consumer type of channel and having an NFT. It seems like that kind of that is more of a peanut butter and chocolate combo than like having, hey, I go through distribution, I go in a warehouse, I sit on a Kroger shelf, and then I'm going to do a DTC for my bologna. It just seems like a little bit harder, a longer haul.
Yeah, I'll tell you why, in my opinion. It's, It's for a couple of reasons. One is that if you are a D2C brand, or at least a brand that has a strong D2C component, even if you do other channels, it means that you're probably wired from a DNA perspective, from a company culture perspective, to appreciate and understand direct consumer relationships, and frankly, understand the importance of engaging with your customers, creating a sense of community, and frankly, even offering them certain benefits for engaging with you because you're a D2C brand. Now, it's harder to do that when you're pure wholesale, right? Pure CPG, because you're not wired that way, and it's harder for you to, I'll call it, interconnect what you're doing on a daily basis with your end consumer than a D2C brand. But it reminds me of when Facebook first came out broadly in 2009 and 10. I'm talking about broadly. They existed before that, but for a while there, they encouraged companies and brands to have a Facebook page that fans could like or fan. I think you actually fanned it. You didn't like it or followed it or fanned it. Yeah. And it had a wall. Okay, so you could like post on your wall and people could comment, and like it was a very Web3 thing for a minute there. Meaning it felt today, now that I participate in Web3, it felt like it was ironic, like the ultimate Web2 company doing something very Web3 because for a brand you're like, whoa, I have now like this direct connection to my customer. In fact, I bet you a lot of CPG companies loved it back then because it was just like, for the first time, it was like, wow, it's like I have my own media channel, my own direct connection. I can like see who my customers are. I can engage with them. And then, of course, that went away when essentially this algorithm thing happened, and then you pretty much had to pay to reach your own customers.
Yeah, everything became pay to play essentially with Facebook. So. Right.
So, and then, by the way, I think Web3 in some regards is a reaction to that. Like, not just specifically to that algorithm, but it's a reaction to this idea that like the idea that the customer is the product, right? Like why is Facebook free? It's because the customer is really the advertiser, and the consumer is providing essentially data and attention and whatever. So like that's a very Web 2 model. And like the Web 3 ethos would be, no, I control my own crypto wallet. I control which NFTs I'll own, which ones I won't own, who I'll connect to, who I won't connect to. It's all very open, but the idea and the ethos of it is to put the end user, consumer, person, human being more in control, as opposed to being at the mercy of an intermediary, right? So when you get into a decentralized ethos like Web3 is, the idea is in philosophy. It doesn't always happen. It can't. In fact, for practical reasons, it can't always happen perfectly. But so you think about the spectrum of decentralization, but it doesn't matter about it, that it's an actual spectrum. The philosophy and the ethos is this idea that I don't want to have to be beholden to an intermediary, right? That could cancel. That could cancel something on me. That could basically censor something on me, and that's the Web3 ethos. And it's actually, but if brands embraced it, if they said, okay, I like that, like that's actually really interesting, because at its heart, I could have a more direct relationship with my customers, whether I'm a CPG company or not, because I'm not having to go through an intermediary like a Facebook or a Google or somebody else. So there's something incredibly powerful for brands to embrace this ethos.
You mentioned Clorox. Like, I don't need a direct relationship with like every brand. Like, I mean, I'm happy to buy socks and bleach and detergent and not necessarily have this, like, I don't want to be in a community, a Discord or DAO with like my bleach provider, but like the passion of like maybe my favorite beer or like a restaurant that I love. Like, what are the areas where food in particular intersects with the idea of Web3 and where that makes sense versus like maybe more commoditized things where, hey, we just, at some point, like you're just literally selling, cleaner and stuff and soap and socks that it doesn't necessarily need to build a community around. I mean, does it make sense? Like, what areas does it make sense in?
I will say, I'll answer your question, but first I can't help myself. I want to challenge you a little bit. What I'd say is, I actually think that if you're a brand marketer at Clorox or any, it doesn't, I don't want to pick on Clorox. Like if you're a brand marketer at a more, I'll call it commoditized sort of, everyday utility CPG product, like I think part of your job, I've never been a brand marketer at a CPG company, although Starbucks had some CPG products. Your job is to be front of mind. It's brand awareness, brand reminding, right? It's like, how do I get like front of mind awareness? And in that respect, like I will say that I do believe that there are a lot of fun things you can do, particularly in the Web3 world, that might make you think about Clorox. Like what if Clorox did some fun, interactive, interesting thing that was like unexpected, but was actually like legitimately creative and interesting? That's, first of all, just on its face, what I just said would be noteworthy. Right. You might pay attention to it. And all of a sudden you found yourself thinking about Clorox that day. So what I tell you is that with a space like this, there's so much room for creativity that just alone. Okay, now let's go back to your question. Let's take a restaurant chain. If you're a restaurant chain, you're like right away, I would be thinking about NFTs as this really cool loyalty access pass. I'd say, look, it could be a complimentary a loyalty program to what you're doing today, and it's ownership based as opposed to transaction based, right? Yeah. It's community based as opposed to coupon based. So without going much further than that, because I have a lot of good ideas, and we're actually talking to some restaurant chains about this right now, which is the idea being like, hey, this is an opportunity of a lifetime to sort of think with a different paradigm around how you could think of this digital asset that you could create pretty easily. You could create community around it, and you could build a different kind of loyalty program around it.
Okay, talking about restaurants, you guys are Brightloom's thinking about this. Mm-hmm. You're not going to like pull the curtain back today. Maybe we can have you back when you do. But when you look at something like what Vaynerchuk has done with his NFT restaurant, the Fly Fish Group, I mean, to a certain degree, I think he can raise $15 million because he carried Vaynerchuk. He had a bit of a first arriver advantage. But then when I look at Portofino's, this restaurant on my corner that I go to, they're probably not going to be much known outside of Edmonds, where I live.
Yeah.
How does someone like that offer an NFT that maybe brings them some value? And what is that? What is that value? Then also, what is the value to the consumer? So I want to bring it hyper local to a small scale restaurant that's not associated with like a celebrity. And what does the NFT do for them?
Yeah, the challenge, so I'll tell you. So imagine a world which we don't live in yet, which we will. Imagine a world where most people or everybody understood how to buy or even just hold or own an NFT. Because it's not all about selling NFTs. Like there are, we hear all this stuff about NFTs as a speculative asset and people making all this money by minting them. But remember, an NFT is just a token on a blockchain that in theory, you could be gifted or a company could give away. Now, there are certain networks have higher energy uses and transaction fees than others. So think about the fact that some of the blockchains out there that produce NFTs, like Solana, for example, they have basically no environment, basically carbon neutral, and have no transaction fees. So a brand could easily give a Solana NFT to their customers. However, today, 99% of their customers wouldn't even know how to hold one because you have to have a crypto wallet today to hold one. You're like, what is a crypto wallet? How do I get one? Again, 99% of Portofino's customers wouldn't know what to do. But imagine a world where they did. Imagine a world where all of Portofino customers, or most of them, were like, yeah, great. You're telling me you're going to give me an NFT, or you're going to sell me an NFT? Well, I'll give you an example. So in that world, in that scenario, Portofino could say, yeah, we know who our best customers are for some, either by name or by some loyalty program we have or email list or whatever, or maybe just by physically when they see them, and they give them an NFT. Oh, here's a code to go claim your free NFT. By the way, there's only ever going to be 300 customers that can own the Portofino NFT. Okay, only 300 ever. And what you get for that is you get reservations whenever you want and free valet parking whenever you want. You roll in like an owner. Yeah. Okay, like. First of all, what a great gift to give their people. And by the way, it's transferable. If you don't value it, you can give it as a gift because you own it. And if you do, now what's going to happen is in the NFT world, these things will have value. There will be a market for those 300 Portofino, and they'll be like, they gave it to them, but they'll go look and say, wow, these things are trading at like $1,000 a piece. Like, because there is a market value to whatever that benefit is. So they could sell it, they could give it to their best customers. They could decide whatever other benefits they wanted to have. And it's the fact that you own it that is so interesting, because you as the customer then can decide, oh, I love this and I'm going to use this all the time. Or it went up in value. That's interesting. I'm going to sell it. Yeah. Or I want to gift it to somebody else. And it's a way. And by the way, the other thing Portofino could do is say, I can see on the blockchain everybody who owns this thing. Now, I can't email them unless they've opted into a loyalty program or something like that. But the fact that I can see them, I can track, this many people got it and never gave it away. This many people decided to sell it to, I wonder who they gave it to. And while you can't email those people, you could invite them into like you called it a Discord, for example, right? You could invite them into a place that says, if you wanted to, all of you are a member of this special club and you all get access to this or that. Maybe you do special events for them or whatever. So I'm just giving you specific examples of, like, in a world where the majority of customers of Portofino knew how to buy/hold an NFT, like, it's an incredible tool for Portofino they don't have today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The idea that you don't have to sell it. It could be something that you give away. There's value to the consumer, and it's kind of self-reinforcing, right? Hey, I've been selected by Portofino. I'm kind of one of the insiders. I'm going to actually go there. I get access to a table. You kind of become like a big shot. And then, like, there's this idea of a secondary market is interesting. So the thing, though, is, like, you said it, 95% of Portofino customers don't know how to use it. They don't have MetaMask or whatever. They don't have, like, a wallet. So someone who has been in digital marketing for a long time, I imagine you're thinking about that. Like, maybe you have some solutions there, but, like, one of the things I think we need to do is just get it out of, like, we're kind of in that mid 90s era with the internet, like how hard it was to get on, like, using, like, Mark Andreessen's browser, bringing up a shell, etc. We're in that phase right now with NFTs. So how do we need to get the average Joe who goes to Portofino's onto, like, the blockchain? How do we do that?
Yeah, you're right. We're working on something right now, but to be honest with you, like, everybody in the space is working on this, right? So Coinbase, for example. So Coinbase is coming out with what I've read. I don't have any special knowledge here. But Coinbase is a major, like the Charles Schwab E-Trade of cryptocurrencies. Okay, they're like they're publicly traded companies where most people, I think, buy Bitcoin and stuff like that in the U.S. They're coming out with an NFT marketplace, and I've heard that they're planning on letting you buy NFTs off their marketplace without having to have a crypto wallet. So, if that's the case, because I think they have, I could be wrong, I don't remember the number, but so don't quote me on this if I'm wrong. It's like, they've got tens and tens of millions of customers today that can buy Coinbase, because you don't need a crypto wallet to buy Bitcoin on Coinbase. That's the whole reason Coinbase existed, is to make it easy for regular people like you and I to go buy Bitcoin, right, without having to go be super technical. If they're planning on doing something similar in NFTs, and I'm not saying Coinbase is going to be the reason everybody's going to go to being able to do this. But they're an example of, like, the entire space is going to move forward that way. And I think you're going to see example after example after example like that, to where you're just going to have to wait a couple of years and it's going to happen organically. And in the meantime, you can go to Nifty. There's a great NFT site called Nifty Gateway that's owned by the company that the Winklevoss twins have, which is, I think, called Gemini. And, like, when you go to Nifty Gateway, you buy NFTs with your credit card, and you don't have to crypto wallet, and they'll hold it for you. And if you do have a crypto wallet, you can ask them to, transfer it out to your crypto wallet. So I think we're going to see more and more nifty gateways, Coinbase NFTs, and things like that.
All right, we spent a lot of time on NFTs. Interesting, but that's not the whole of Web3 and the metaverse. With regards to the metaverse, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about that in terms of like how it applies to food, how it applies to restaurants, how it applies to consumer loyalty?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Are there any kind of initial thoughts? Like, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I'm excited about the idea. Well, I'm excited about the idea of if you're participating in the metaverse, and I don't know what that even means in the sense of like it probably means some. I mean, people think of the movie Ready Player One and of this sort of collective metaverse that everybody is in the same metaverse in a virtual reality kind of way. Like, I think that's quite interesting and probably one version of what's going to be in the metaverse. There's a lot of individual metaverses like Sandbox and Crypto Voxels, and like there's a bunch of NFT World, and like there's a bunch of different metaverses, okay, that are going to exist. Yeah. Just like there's different video games. But what they all have in common is there's this idea that we're going to go and there's going to be a digital version of ourselves, like almost like Second Life or SimCity, where we're walking around in this digital world and we're bumping into people and we're experiencing things and we're doing stuff digitally that we normally do in real life. And in that case, if you're a restaurant, you want to be there, and I guess you'd want to be there and do stuff that's interesting. Maybe one of those interesting things you're doing is letting people order food from you. And I've seen a lot of that right now. Like when I see patents that are being filed and stories that are being filed, you see a lot of like restaurants are going to show up in the metaverse and let people order food that way. Now, look, I'm a little biased, but I think we're a ways off from that being like, I think NFTs and sort of their use as a multi-purpose, like loyalty, access, identity, digital collectible community formation tool, that's going to be more relevant first before there's going to be critical mass of people living in some virtual reality world.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not poking fun at the virtual reality metaverse world because I think it's very real and it's going to explode and be huge. And I think even you and I, Mike, will be having this podcast in some, and I'm not kidding you, like in 10 years from now, you and I will be doing this, like maybe in the metaverse. Like it is a trend.
You mean I'm going to have to put on Facebook's virtual reality headset to do a podcast? That's like a lot of work, Adam. I don't know if I want to.
Well, actually, I know, but it's funny, Mike, about to think about it. Wouldn't it be cool if right now you and I were doing this like in a Johnny, kind of Tonight Show kind of style, where we were sitting down together, but we're not together, but we could feel like we were together. We could feel like your audience was in the audience. We could see their avatars. Like it'd be kind of cool in a way, right? So but the point is, back to your question, if you're a restaurant brand, like in real life restaurant brand, I don't like making it, okay, so I'm in the metaverse. I guess I'm walking up to the counter and I'm ordering, maybe, like, don't get me wrong. Like, is that easier than my Starbucks app right now? I'd argue the Starbucks app's actually easier, but whatever. Like, let's just say that it's not and it's easier. I actually don't think that's the opportunity for restaurant brands. I think the opportunity for restaurant brands is showing up in the metaverse and doing things that they could not do in the real world. So there's this term I learned from listening to a podcast with Chris Dixon and Naval and Tim Ferriss, where they're talking about this concept of skeuomorphism, which is like people will take, when technology evolves, they'll like take the one form they're used to and sort of transport that thing they're used to, right, into the new technology. And I think the idea of like a restaurant like showing up in the metaverse as a restaurant that you order food from is not the most interesting thing I would do in the metaverse. I would actually like, if I'm a restaurant in the metaverse, like all of a sudden, like I would do things that are super on brand. Like I'd be throwing like, I'm making this up. If I'm a Starbucks in the metaverse, I'm like I'm not just serving coffee. I'm growing coffee. I'm giving people tours of my farm in Costa Rica in the metaverse. Like, that's what I'm doing if I'm Starbucks in the metaverse. Like, what are the things that I wish I could transport people to and experiences to that I can't scale in real life because of distance or cost or physics? But like, I heard an example of JP Morgan has a branch in the metaverse where they've got a tiger in their branch, like roaming around.
That's fun.
I actually thought it was cool. Like, I was like, yeah, because like you're not going to put a real tiger in a JP Morgan branch, but like in the metaverse, you can do it because it's not going to bite you.
So it's an immersive community extension tool to give them your community that experiences that they maybe otherwise wouldn't have. I do think, we had a metaverse conference. We talked to, for example, a company called Carbon Origins, and they were basically trying to reach and find virtual reality fluent people to actually operate their on sidewalk robots. So like, I think maybe is a way to also like find interesting experts to kind of do things for you. That's one interesting idea. Also, I think like I've thought about like maybe what does Yelp look like in like the metaverse? Like what is like walking to, if I'm going to New York next week and I want to like find out what restaurants look like, maybe I can actually go and walk in some of the cool ones. I like the vibe here. Maybe that gives me a better idea. So, I mean, maybe there are some like way discovery tools and also like a way to access interesting people. Yeah,
no, you're right. Like if you could just, that's a great application. I never thought of that. Like the idea of like, I could actually go check it out, hotels, like I could actually go see what my room's going to be like. Right. Like that's cool. Like you're right. Like there's a lot of times where it's like, if I could hyperspace somewhere, if I had a magic wand, what would I do? Like that's what the metaverse is good for.
It's funny. I've been following metaverse and kind of virtual reality interaction with food for a while. And there's also some really kind of far out there research projects at the university level that is trying to do things like how do you simulate the taste of food? And just this week, I saw a startup that is actually doing a virtual reality add-on that actually has basically a cartridge that does different scents. So I think like that's, it's 5 years out, whatever. But I think the idea of like kind of multi-sensory virtual experiences, that's maybe where food can come more alive. But like that might be a ways out there.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a metaverse. I'm not an expert at anything. Certainly, I'm not a Web3 expert. I'm definitely not a metaverse expert. What I'd say is though, I wouldn't use digital, whether it's metaverse, NFTs, or otherwise, to do things that I can do better non-digital. Like in other words, why would I want to simulate the smell? Now I get it, like the smell of coffee or whatever. Like that'd be kind of cool if I was like walking into a whatever Starbucks thing in the metaverse. Like that would be kind of cool to have the smell of coffee. But I don't, I want my, I want my real coffee, to be like, it's just, again, my issue isn't that I can't get my real coffee when I need to. It's, I would love to learn more about origin countries. I'd love to, the other thing with the metaverse for brands and restaurants is that people do different things in the metaverse they won't do in real life, not just because of the distance and the cost and the physics of it, but also like, they don't like one of the cool things about the metaverse and anonymity in Web3 is that for a lot of people, they feel more comfortable being themselves when they're not being judged by either how they look or preconceived notions about things, or maybe they're just shy. But the point is like, there's a real interesting unlock that can happen when you're not just the constraint of physics and depth of distance and cost, but even just how people might act differently when they can be a digital representation of themselves. And by the way, that's probably not always good, but I think for the most part, I tend to be kind of a glass half full guy. Like that's the other thing brands have to realize, like, if that's true, then how can we take advantage of that to have a better relationship with customers, because they can be more themselves, or they might be less embarrassed about something. Or I'm talking about people who are shy in general. Yeah. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like that's just a cool factor that like another part of the Web3 ethos that I kind of like, which is that people don't get judged but books don't get judged by their cover in Web3 as much.
Yeah.
It also leads to a lot of scams and a lot of bad behavior.
Yeah.
So it cuts both ways.
Yeah. That's the thing about NFTs and crypto and metaverses. There's like a lot of people jumping in, being opportunistic, and there's a lot of there's some shadiness happening there as well. So I think like the industry just has to be careful and guard against that to a certain degree before the whole space gets stained, gets that taint, if you will. Yeah,
but there's nobody better than Gary Vaynerchuk. There's actually like a meme of how he reacted when he got asked this question recently on a interview where somebody was talking about that, and he had the best answer I've ever heard, which is just like, it's true. It's like there's every day today there's scams and rug pulls and problems in non-crypto. Like, in fact, there's a lot more in non-crypto than there is in crypto. It's just like every new technology has these issues, and it gets painted this way. And don't get me wrong, they're real, but it's a little unfair in some senses. I know you're not saying this. It's just a little unfair to be like, just focusing on those things, because there's like all sorts of scams and problems in non-crypto every day. And we just we just have gotten more used to it. And then the problems in crypto, which there are plenty, they just make more of the headlines a lot of times, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I agree to a certain degree, but like, I think so many people missed out on that first wave of Bitcoin that like everyone who wants to now get rich in crypto has entered the space. It's also like there's not the technical barriers of certain startups, right? Like you can't actually start a biotech company very easily unless you have someone on staff as a chief science officer. You don't really need that with a crypto startup, right? Or whatever, or you know what I mean? So I think the barriers to entry are pretty low.
Yeah, but that's true. But people would have said that about email scammers from, wherever, or like social media influence scams and stuff. Like, you're right. Like, technology makes certain things easier, and then it makes scams easier too. And I don't think crypto is any different than other technologies in that regard. Crypto is complicated and scary until you throw that in, and it just becomes more sensational at times. But don't get me wrong. I don't think that there's plenty of opportunity for improvement in this space, and you got to be careful. You're right.
And I'm not like obviously we've had a conference on it. We write about it a lot. I'm not a doubter on it. I just think it's an area that you're seeing a lot of people jump into pretty quickly. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But I'm excited to see where Brightloom comes out on this. It sounds like you guys are looking into it. So Adam, I'm excited to see what you guys do. Thank you so much for spending time with me and telling me about what you guys are working on.
You're welcome, Mike. Stay tuned. We got some exciting things in the works.
Awesome. All right. You a believer, a doubter? I think there's a lot of both. And so that's why we have these conversations, to explore the early nascent markets and see where people are coming from and get their opinions, because I think that's ultimately what helps contribute to the development of these spaces. And I think restaurants in this particular area will be fun to watch over the next few years. And I think Adam has a good record of bringing digital tools and platforms to restaurants. So I think that was an interesting conversation. He has some interesting things to say. So we'll be having more of these conversations. We're actually bringing back Simulate, our Web3 meets food mini virtual conference. We're going to have another edition of this in early May. So if you want to learn more about that, you can just go to spoon.tech. I also put a link in this post as well. And hopefully we'll have Adam there to talk about what he's building as well. You can ask some questions. So, all right, folks, that's it for this week. We'll talk to you soon.